The students from the class this semester are going to share one of their ideas. So 4 ideas, each of them have an individual idea. Share some of the ideas that they've thought up and worked on this last semester about that topic, how media can impact culture in a positive way. After the presentations, after the 4 of them, they may have time for a few questions. In fact, they almost certainly will have time for a few questions. But just by way of preface and introduction, the point of what they've been learning and talking about and doing, it really makes them heroes to stand up in front of you today and present some of their ideas. Because it really is taking a completely different look at what it means to impact culture, different from what you may typically learn in an education course. So we have 4 heroes who are willing to put themselves on the line, talking about something that is completely new to them, or was completely new to them not too long ago. So they deserve our congratulations and our thanks for being willing to step out there like this. And I'm sure they're going to do great in the presentation and also great in the questions. Mike Johnson's been my co-teacher this semester, and do you have anything else in preface you want to say, Mike, before we get started?
Well, just this is actually to further clarify, this is the second half, kind of a second part of the course. Previous semester, and in one case a year ago, we spent a lot of time discussing principles and things like this. This has been more of a practicum this semester, so this is the kind of the result of where we've gotten so far in a 1 credit hour class. So remember that, and then you can completely run.
So we'll turn it over to the students and take it away.
Our first student is Jay Boswick, and he couldn't be here. He's away at a conference, so he's created a video presenting his idea, and we'll just let Jay's video speak for itself from there.
When it comes to learning and engaging with new cultures, people come into the experience with all kinds of expectations. Really, they're looking to have an adventure. They want to meet people. They want to eat exotic foods and see amazing places. Whatever the specific expectations are, though, the excitement that a person has going into an experience like this is tangible. They just cannot wait to get out and start experiencing the world. Once they get into things, though, really start engaging with a new community, really engaging with new ways of life, usually things turn out differently than what they had expected. Maybe they weren't able to adapt as easily as they thought they would be. Maybe they don't impact the world in the ways they thought they would be able to. They're not learning the things that they hoped they'd learn. And when it's all over, a lot of times people feel unfulfilled, they feel drained, they feel like failures. Meanwhile, everyone they see at home keeps asking them, "How was your trip?" And this person that was supposed to have this amazing experience abroad honestly doesn't know what to say. Now, does this mean that their experience was a waste of time? That they should have just stayed home? We kind of have this shared narrative that travel should be this great adventurous journey. And when we measure our real life experience against that ideal, more often than not, our experiences fall short. But I want to tell a story, write a screenplay that presents a different possibility. That helps us to have the right expectations of cross-cultural interactions. That helps us see the value in learning experiences that don't necessarily have a set resolution. I want to tell a story about going out into the world and finding yourself collecting questions rather than answers, even becoming uncertain about things you thought you already knew. The story I want to tell is about Ben, a young, unpublished writer. More than anything else, what Ben needs is a great story to tell. Ben's family doesn't really support his decision to be a writer, and if he could just get published, then he can show them that he's not wasting his life, that he really can make it as a writer.
fascinating.
Improvise there. Speak for
So, he's talking about layers.
And it's so abstract that you can't hear it.
I honestly don't know layer presentation. You guys were just worrying that you can utilize.
I can give a very brief summary of it. So this young man goes out on this journey and he follows his uncle who has written home about all these amazing adventures he has, and he kind of goes on this hunt for his uncle. He eventually finds him.
Before long, Ben has to come home without having
Nice
He
segue.
never
It's at
finds
this
him.
point, after everything has fallen apart, as he's having to face, as a failed writer, his family, his professor, as he's having to move back in with his parents and rely on them for support because he's broke, it's at this point that he begins to see new possibilities for his life. And ultimately, he is able to write a story based on his experiences abroad, a story that is unlike anything he'd imagined writing before. Ben's story demonstrates a more realistic view of cultural experiences, where clarity doesn't come immediately, where learning is triggered not by having answers, but by first running out of answers. We need to expect for ourselves and for those we design for that transformative learning is going to be demanding. Our capabilities will be strained, our resources are going to run out, our deepest beliefs are going to be contradicted even. But if we try to protect against these uncomfortable situations, we make it impossible to even recognize great learning opportunities, let alone create them. Ben's story helps us to expect the right things, to expect feelings of ambiguity and uncertainty when learning from other cultures. With these expectations, we're better prepared to have our lives changed in powerful ways as we go out to learn about the world. My name is Jay Bostwick. Thank you for your time.
Yay. Okay. Well, as I sit here, I realize I don't know too many of you. My name is Rob Stevenson, and I'm a master's student in the IP&T program. And you know, as I look out here, I do know some of you, and many of us have lots of wonderful aspirations. We want to make a huge difference in our lives, in the lives of others, and I want you to kind of self-reflect on those. The questions I'll ask will be rhetorical, so you don't necessarily need to raise your hand and answer them right now. But what are some of those things that you really desire, the things that you really intend on making a large difference in? And how far are you willing to go to actually accomplish those things? What kind of journey is going to be required of you to accomplish your ideals? This is a picture of Market Garden, Operation Market Garden in World War II. My great-grandfather was a pilot in that. What were the ideals that they were fighting for here? What were some of those, how far were they willing to go? Particularly this guy, whose engine seems to be burning out at the bottom here. How far was he willing to go to pursue his ideals? And we need to consider that as we go about our journey. I want to introduce you to Jim. Jim is the main character in the book I'm writing. And as we talk about Jim today, I want you to reflect, how does this relate to some of the main principles that he has to go through, perhaps in a narrative, to the things that we have to go through as learners, as students, as professors, just in our daily lives to accomplish greatness. Jim grew up in an upper level family where they had some money, and he had a lot of things given to him, perhaps lots of privileges like many of us possibly enjoyed as we grew up. And his parents started to notice some problems with that. He started taking the freedoms that he had for granted. He started just assuming things would be handed to him on a silver platter and they would come easily. And so his parents planned a summer vacation unlike any other. They planned to visit a nation where those freedoms weren't currently enjoyed, and just to expose him and their family to some of the other side of those things, just to instill some gratitude in him. So they go on this trip, and it has the impact they want, and as they return home, it not only had the impact of helping Jim to be grateful, but it helped instill in him a desire to help those people he saw gain the same freedoms he did. So over the next few months, he pursues all sorts of different ideas of how he can make this happen for those people that he saw that were being oppressed by their government and by their social stratification where they visited. And he eventually comes across a special operations unit that is being created by the government here to go in, infiltrate their social structure, and start to turn it inside out to start making some of the social changes necessary to help them have the freedoms that he enjoyed. So, being right up exactly in line with the ideals that he wanted to pursue, he enlists. He's given an official certification here, and kind of like in our lives, as much as we'd like to not need a certification to accomplish great things, often they're required. Professors have to have PhDs, military has to have rankings, missionaries have to have name tags to be authenticated. And so he receives that, and he enters his training and starts to be challenged. He learns all sorts of tactical skills, both in war, in government, in social culture, and he starts to pursue and understand what he's going to do exactly as he gets to go on his mission. They challenge him, they continually remind him of the vision of this purpose behind it, that they're there to help these people, and they challenge him with different trials, and eventually the day comes when he's ready to enter his battle. He's ready to go out into the real field. And very quickly, he realizes, perhaps like a missionary feels as they leave the MTC, going to the field, he gets the nerves. He gets planted in this battlefield and starts to realize that the sterile environment that he's been trained in isn't the environment he's all of a sudden in. The different things that he's been trained to do are not happening or playing out like he anticipated. And he realizes that the training he received was okay, but it wasn't super practical. And his world gets turned upside down. His unit, the Special Operations Unit, is seen as an enemy, and they're attacked and they're disbanded. And the people, he starts to realize that the people that he's there to serve actually hate him. Perhaps like a math teacher with a reputation at a high school for being difficult. The people that he's there to serve don't like him. And so, as he serves, he starts returning hate for hate. People do mean things to him, so he returns the mean things. And it comes to a time when Jim needs to realize, is he going to hate back, or is he going to learn to love that which doesn't return love? And I think all of us face that sometimes in our pursuit of education. We need to learn to love those things which may not love in return. These are my two little boys. We were at the dinner table not too long ago, eating some broccoli as part of the balanced diet. And while this is staged, this is pretty much the reaction that we got from them. And we could have let this go on, and we could have let them continue to hate broccoli, much like some students that start to hate learning, start hating, they turn hate for hate and all that stuff. And my wife turned it on its side and said, hey, you know, this is going to make you strong. This is going to make you help you accomplish your goals. And even more so, she said, these are cool little trees you get to eat. And as that was mentioned, desires and perspectives of broccoli changed, and triumph ensued. And you know, while this is just an example, of course, and my little 2-year-old doesn't always just jump right into eating broccoli, just like a student may not jump right into the topic we have presented for them. We need to always remember, we're gonna have trials as we learn. Jim faced all sorts of stuff in the story that I tell, and he overcame. And I'm not going to tell you how he overcame today, but we all have our dreams. We all have things that we really want to make an impact on in our lives, and those impacts will only happen as we pursue the little choices that we have to make. In our recent general conference, Elder Cook said this. He said, "The refiner's fire is real, and qualities of character and righteousness that are forged in the furnace of affliction perfect and purify us." And then he went on to quote someone that had an impact on me. He quoted Ella Wheeler Wilcox. And she said, "There is no chance, no fate, no destiny that can circumvent or hinder or control the firm resolve of a determined soul." And so, today is the day that we pursue our dreams. There's never going to be adequate time to do our best work. We just need to make time for it. Thank you.
So, allow me to introduce you to Kira, who just happens to be the princess of the far-off kingdom of Farafel. This is her story, in which she learns two very important things. First, that with knowledge comes great responsibility, and that strength is discovered only when it is tested. For it is Kira who holds a secret upon which the fate of the entire kingdom will come to rest. So, all was good and all was well in the far-off kingdom of Farafel. The kingdom was prosperous, powerful enough to ward off enemies and to protect surrounding regions. The peasants were peaceful, except for occasional squabblings in the market. Even the royals rarely fought amongst themselves. Houses lay in neat rows. Even farmlands were well organized. Subjects knew their duties and performed them without question. Farafelian families were a marvel. All the men were strong, all the women were beautiful, and by all measures, all the children were above average. Children went to school where everyone learned. Youth became first successful apprentices and then successful merchants. Elders imparted their wisdom to younger generations, and healers warded off illness when they could. Because long ago, the decision had been made to distribute healing visits with absolute precision, so as to promote equity and fairness among the citizens of Farafel. Each family received exactly one visit per year. If illness crept into the house in between times, the family either cured it themselves or lost a loved one. Such was simply the way of things in far-off Farafel. However, such systems as these prove their worth only when challenged. And such challenges inevitably come, often through exceptions to long-standing rules. Such was also the state of affairs in Farafel when unknown diseases began creeping across their borders in greater and greater numbers. To bring about a cure, Kira must finally reveal her long-kept secret. However, even this is not enough to bring about a change in the healing system, despite its powerlessness to save a rapidly decreasing population. Because the king is loath to alter the system that has kept he and his family safe for centuries, until it fails him too. The king must then ask himself the oft unanswered question: when does the cost of inaction outweigh the price of change?
So, the story I want to tell you, it's about something that I think all of us can relate to. See, what do you think would happen if a pessimist is given the ability to make people happy by granting them one wish? Anyone's wish, he can grant them one wish, the thing they desire most. Any wish, anyone's wish, except his own wish. So, to illustrate some of the things I'm going to talk about in this particular proposal, I want to share with you some scriptures that I meshed together. The Lord said, "In the day I created them, gave I unto man their agency, to act for themselves and not be acted upon. Therefore they became free to choose, and they are, that they might have joy." Let me introduce you to someone. This is Isaac. Now, we all know Isaac. Not that Isaac, this Isaac. Isaac is our brother. Maybe he's our father, maybe even our mother or sister, our friend, our neighbor, our child, maybe even us. You see, Isaac is an archetype. And let me tell you a little bit about Isaac. He's never happy with what he has or what he's doing. He's always waiting for something to happen to make him happy. But will it ever really make him happy? A good question. True that. So, it's not that Isaac's always unhappy, because he is happy from time to time, but his life isn't filled with joy the way that it should be. So, for instance, Isaac hates his apartment because it's old and kind of grody, and he hates the sink because it has 2 faucets. So you can never get the temperature right. It's either too hot or too cold, and you're doing this motion trying to get your hands washed. And it just drives him nuts. But he doesn't choose to focus on the fact that he has this beautiful view out his window. There's all these neat buildings that he can see, and he has this beautiful view of the ocean, and he lives close enough to work that he can walk there every day. And speaking of work, he kind of hates his job too, because it's boring, it's the same thing every day, and it's not very glamorous. And he doesn't make quite as much money as some of his friends do. But again, he doesn't focus on the fact that his job is really stable. He's had it for several years, his company is growing that he's working for, so the likelihood that he's still going to be around in 5 years is pretty good. So, the thing is that he keeps waiting for something to act upon him to make him happy, instead of acting for himself. This all changes one day when he meets, well, I should say, choosing to look for the good in life and ignoring the bad. That's what he really should be doing. Choosing to look for the good in life and ignoring the bad. So Isaac's life kind of changes one day when he meets Josephine. Now I know what you're all thinking, and that's wrong. That's not what I'm talking about here. You know, Josephine, she's the kind of person who's always happy. She's got a perma smile on her face. And you can't help but be a little happier when you're around Josie. Now, we've all met people like this before, and they kind of brighten your day. Unless you're having one of those days where it's just been a rotten, miserable day, and you just want to be miserable. And then you get around this person, and they try to cheer you up, and it just makes you even more angry and frustrated, and they become angry and frustrated, and it's just a bad situation for everyone. That's exactly what happened when Isaac met Josie. She did her best to try to cheer him up, and all it did was make him more upset. And frankly, Josie didn't like that too much, because Josie liked to be happy. So she exercised a special power that she had, and she cursed him. She cursed him with the ability to grant other people's wishes, the thing that they desire most at that moment, but that will also be a detriment to himself by granting that wish. So for instance, Isaac's best friend at work has been seeking to get this promotion for a year. That's the thing he wants most right now. And Isaac could use his power to grant that wish, and his friend would get that promotion at work. Unfortunately, that's the same promotion that Isaac wants. So if Isaac grants that wish, he's not going to get that promotion. Now, how is that going to work out? I don't know. What should Isaac do in this kind of a situation? Well, I'll tell you what, things get even more complicated when his ex-girlfriend comes back into the picture after 2 years. The girl that he wished he could have married. And now he has the ability to make her happy, he believes. To give her whatever she wants. But to his own detriment each time. So is that really going to make him happy? What should Isaac do? I ask, what would you do? Because we're all Isaac. Or we're an example to an Isaac. So what would we do? Whatever it is, I suggest we just do it. Thanks.
Okay, so those are the 4 presentations. We have about 20 minutes left. You can ask the students questions about the content of their ideas, what the point of those ideas were, how it relates to anything that would be related to this degree program, or anything else perhaps you learned in the course that you just might be interested in hearing about. So please feel free to, I'll have all 3 of you stand up. Stand up. Stand in front of everybody so they can all see you. And ask away.
Or we can all just stand here awkwardly.
Yes.
So I noticed a piece of each presentation, although, you know, maybe with the J's it was, you know, the audio-visual thing. But with each presentation there's intentionally something missing, a piece of it that you don't get, and so I was just wondering, like, so, you know, why that choice, why that focusing on these narratives with incomplete narratives?
Because you had to come see the movie, man. That actually is part of it. Is this? We want to engage you. We want you to start asking questions, but we don't want to give you the answers just yet.
Well, part of what we learned in this class was about pitching, and so this was actually an exercise in pitching for us, so how we would pitch the idea to someone so that they kind of latch onto it so much that they're like, okay, I can't go on without having this idea in my life anymore. I just have to, anyway, and getting people to engage with it.
They can start answering questions themselves and take some ownership in it too. Jake?
So how are these presentations, the things that you presented, products of what you've learned so far about media and cultural change?
It's the idea more behind them. The presentations themselves are just kind of the interface to get them out there, but the ideas behind them are the power of media in any facet to instill change in societies or subcultures in societies, and so it's the ideas behind them, some of the main principles we addressed in them. Would be my response, I guess.
I kind of alluded to it a little bit in my presentation. My main character is someone that most people are supposed to be able to relate to, either as being themselves or as being someone they know. And seeing his transformative experience, think about the gift that he gets. Really, it's a gift that we all have. We all have the ability to try to do things to make other people happy. And so it's just an exaggerated ability that we all can exercise in our own lives.
I have a question. In all of your presentations, what came first, the message or the media? The idea, or you saw something that invoked in you some sort of feeling and got interested?
For me, it was the message. We worked on these messages for a little while first before we even knew we were pitching them here, so.
Yeah, shock and awe.
Yeah.
What? Other questions? Oh, Andy?
So, what does this have to do with instructional design? All three of you.
Okay. So in this case, we're designing a change of culture, and we're doing it in a little subtle way. And so it's not the traditional sense of instructional design where here's a course, and you're going to do this thing and have these outcomes. But we do have an outcome that we're hoping for. We're hoping that people will change their attitudes and change their beliefs. And we're using story to get these principles about how you can act in a certain way in order to change, to be a different person or a better person. In my case, to find happiness in the things around you in life instead of looking at the negative. And so we're still have some content. We still have an outcome. It's just sugar-coated, I guess, if you will, with a fun story that gets people more engaged.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of a different way of thinking about designing instruction, because we still are hoping for something to happen at the end. Again, it's just, the medium is really different with, again, that goal that they'll bite into it because it's appealing, but then they'll take something with them after the experience.
My answer to your question is layers. In honesty, for me, it was, this class has been not a, I'm not dissing either of the professors. It's not like an amazingly outlined class. We don't know exactly what we're going to learn in class today. It's an experience, and it's messy, and we're making tons of mistakes with each other. We've gotten pretty comfortable with around each other because of that, and it's kind of the learning experience, and it's not the typical tidy, sterile classroom experience.
So what's more important as you were making up your pitches? What was your goal in terms of intellectual appeal versus emotional appeal? What were you trying to do to us in framing your pitches and designing your pitches for us?
Well, for me, it was mostly emotional, because the principles I was endorsing aren't like these, they are change the world in principles, but they're not these principles that are totally unknown to us. Oftentimes, they're just things that we need to be reminded of. So I was trying to get across an emotional appeal so that we could remember these things and say, oh yeah, I remember people like that, or I've been like that myself at times, and yeah, I do need to do those things. So it was mostly emotional for me, and just reminding of these intellectual things we probably already know.
I would say the same. It's more an emotional appeal, which is kind of the strong suit of this way of designing. It's appealing to the heart almost before you appeal to the mind. I mean, it's kind of this, you need to do both, but it's kind of reaching out to people's emotions and how they feel and who they are, instead of just trying to reach the mind and have them think in a certain way. So it's more transformative, I think.
So Rob, what is the role of emotion in learning?
It's huge. I don't have any amazing quotes or anything to give, but if you can connect with the student on an emotional level, they'll be more willing to invest on an intellectual level. And if they feel like you understand them as a person and not just them up here, from my experience, they'll be more willing to give you a lot more effort up here.
Dr. Nanchuk, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, actually, I had a couple observations, but I wanted to ask you a question too. So I can be quick with my observations, but so do you think you could say a little bit more about some of the theorizing that went on for you guys behind the scenes as you were thinking about how do I want to get this message out? What is this going to be all about? How am I going to present this? Or what animated just way of thinking about a learning invitation?
So for me, I guess the way I found the message I wanted to share was we all tried to think about things that were important to us. And as we did that, then we kind of started to narrow down. And so this was something that I was noticing in other people's lives around me, and even sometimes in my own life. And I thought, this is something I want to do better at. And this is something that my friends need to do better at because they're driving me nuts. And so that's something I knew I wanted to do. And so preparing for this particular pitch, I said, who's the audience? Who am I pitching this to? And so knowing who all was going to be here, and the things that we share culturally were things that I could put into my pitch. That's why I was able to share 3 or 4 scriptures. I knew I had to be careful in what pictures I found. Because if there's someone who's got a coffee cup, you're not going to relate to them the same way as if they were dressed in a different way or looked a certain way. So that was part of how it came in for me.
We were instructed with given some tools to build off of, particularly that we were invited to build on intellectual appeal, emotional appeal, and what was the last one? There's 3 or 4. Anyway, we're trying to appeal to different aspects throughout our presentations, and so I just thought, what's the purpose of my presentation? And I just kind of took the premise that all of us have greatness in it, and I always find myself so busy that I don't ever pursue 1 or 2 things and make it great. I try to spread myself too thin, and so I thought that's what I'll appeal to, everyone's desire to be great. We just often don't take the time to do it.
So does Samuel want to add anything? Because I'm going to follow up with you guys, but go ahead. No, you don't have to, I don't care.
Okay.
So different people, but very nice again.
Make her, if you give her a choice, she won't do it.
Well,
So, like they said, the first part of the class was really interesting because they had us kind of go digging inside of ourselves and find things, not just surface things that were important to us, but like what is kind of at the core of you that you want to express in this way, which was kind of a hard process. Not necessarily fun facing yourself in that very raw way, but that's how we got to where we are, and so I'm grateful for that.
so let me follow up by following up with Dan. So you are, part of your message is about agency and about how you're going to make decisions, how you're going to treat people, and be involved with others in terms of like your attitude and so on. So was there some, part of what I'm asking, was there some body of theoretical work somewhere that assumed that learners were agents? You're trying to convince people they're agents, they need to be engaging in the world a certain way. Was it theorizing that already was consistent with that you could bring to bear as you thought, well, not the content, but like the process, why you put pieces together and order things the way you did and emphasize certain things. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So basically, I knew you were going to love mine if you were here. So really, it's just my understanding of the scriptures is what it was. It's just this fact that we, from things I've read in the church about our ability to act and not simply to be acted upon, and by having the ability to act, we need to make choices. And those choices sometimes are not as obvious to us, I think, as they could be. And so we're making choices all the time and don't realize it. So in this case, my character was making choices to see the bad. And he didn't really realize he was making those choices, but that's exactly what he was doing. And so bringing that concept to mind that, hey, this is what you're doing, and you can make choices, you can make these same choices, but make a different choice at that juncture, can have a totally different effect on your life.
So it's kind of like the process by creating, you to create this, and the product, the message itself was kind of the same thing for you, right? Which is kind of like,
yeah.
It seems like one of the things you were doing is trying to confront your learner with something that they hadn't really been confronted with exactly before. Right? That's thought-provoking, that draws them in, and that invites them to think about this in a new way that then they can themselves inquire into, right?
Right.
Because you're not telling them what they're supposed to, you're not telling them the learning outcome here.
Right.
They're going to figure that out, right?
Exactly.
So it's like, you're not finishing the instructions for them, you're not giving them a grade, you're trying to help them engage in some process of exploration, self-exploration, and it can be very enriching. So,
Right.
it'd be nice if there was learning theories that would help support the doing of that.
Yeah. No, that
Okay,
makes
that's
sense.
fine. That's all. Yeah, I think that's-
So-
Working on
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm really curious. I have this continuing question about the difference between sales and education teaching. And pitches seems to be a very sales-oriented word. So can you explain that and how pitching is the same or different from actually teaching?
Well, you're the teachers, right? We got to sell you guys first.
Also, when you're selling something, you're trying to educate someone with your product, and you may go about it slightly differently, but it's all education. You're just trying to inform them about your product and hopefully not embellishing too much. And it's just a form of education in my mind.
Don't you have to be heartless to be a salesperson?
Only if it's a good product.
Now, this is being filmed. I would be careful.
Tell a
what you say.
politician, ask a politician.
Well, I mean, you shared principles that are really important to you personally. I'm just kind of curious, like, after this class, what specific cultures would you change with this principle or others?
Well, this is something that when I was coming up with these ideas, I love movies, as most of you probably know. So it's always been my dream to write a feature film. And I kind of thought of it as saying, if this is something I could actually put out there in the theaters, that would be my audience. This, the world, I guess, but specifically, American theater goers. This is a message that I thought could really get out to a lot of people. And so that was kind of my hope, was that even though we pitched today to this small LDS audience, this kind of reach the world.
For mine, I mean, I plan. I don't know if I'll ever write this entire book or not. I hope I'll do it someday. But we all have greatness, and it's the little choices we make constantly that lead to that greatness. I'm a huge basketball fan. Jimmer became great not because he's a gifted athlete. It's because he put in the work, he put in the time. He made all the little choices leading up to it that made him really good. And so, I mean, all of us can do that in our own sphere of influence. And I hope that we recognize that we're all blessed with different abilities and we can be great in those things. Which is
For me, what I found as I was digging through the inner compartments of myself is that education is really my big thing, and that's the one thing that I would change. Like, if I were granted a wish, that would be it. To change our system so that it treats children as humans and not, less like robots. But again, it's one thing to come out and say that, and people are like, whoa, and it's another to tell a story and use a metaphor, which in my case was their healthcare system, and show, like, these are the effects that this has on a society. If you're okay with that, that's fine, and if you're not, then join us in this cause, and let's try and do something about it. So, those are my thoughts.
Just a quick question. So you talked a lot about the intellectual side of things, the emotional side of things. Did you find that when you really tried to get an emotional message out, something that you really truly believed in, did you find it difficult to add intellectual backing to it, or add that information in, or did that get lost, or was that no problem at all? Does that make sense?
I think so. To me, they're really intertwined. And so, because the emotion I have is because this is a true principle, and if we live it, we're going to be happier. So, I mean, there wasn't, in this terms of intellectual, I mean, it's pretty straightforward to me, I guess. So it wasn't, they were tied together.
Well, and interestingly, most of what we studied were things like narrative and film and what was it? Myth, structure. So kind of those kinds of things instead of more the learning theory so we were more learning how do I craft this to do what I want it to do instead of, I don't know. So the intellectual piece of it was very different than a lot of the things that we do in instructional design. So it's interesting.
There's time for one more question.
Sean?
It seems like making a good story, making a good pitch, crafting a good story, there's two parts. There's what goes into the story, but maybe just as importantly, what doesn't go in this story? Do you have any examples of things that you were thinking about including in your stories, but decided not to, and why?
Well, I don't have an example of something specific I didn't include in my story, but I can tell you that I was trying to write the end from the beginning, because I needed to understand how it ended in order to understand how everything needed to be set up. So I knew I wanted a character who could grant some wishes, but I really didn't have any rules for how that would happen. And so I threw around some different ways that he could do it, different ways it would work. And once I finally figured out how it needed to end, then I said, okay, well, if it's going to end like this, I have to set this rule, and I can't do this and this. Otherwise, he could fix the situation too easily. And so once that came into play, then I could go backwards and say, well, then this kind of a situation would work, and this would show this and that, and so.
Just to comment about what Pam said is, which if we have a metaphor, which most of our stories pretty much are, we try to stick to the metaphor and not get too explicit with the message it's giving, to allow the reader to really interpret that on their own and find out about it. And so that's what I consciously left out a little bit in my story or in my book, is I'm not saying explicitly what I hope you learn. I hope you come to a conclusion yourself.
And I'm trying to think, mine actually went through like several iterations because it would start going down a certain way and I was like, oh, that's not what I want. And I kept trying to attack it, again, from the point of the education system and just talking about that, and it totally wasn't working for me. And finally, when I decided to make that instead a metaphor, was when things finally clicked and started to work and have the meaning that I was hoping for.
So I hope you see why I called these students heroes. One, because they were willing to show off really a class project in a very public way, which I think deserves a lot of respect and admiration, and also that they're willing to stand up and answer questions in front of an audience on something that they've spent 2 semesters learning about. So in both senses, I think this is absolutely a heroic effort, and we thank them all very much. Thank you for your attendance. Hope this is interesting in multiple ways, but hope that there's at least something that you found interesting and insightful, and that you take away and incorporate somehow into the learning patterns, learning theories, and ideals that you think are most interesting. One more round of applause for the students, and then seminar.